Hey everyone, welcome back to Tea Time. This is Brian at MagicLinks, and today we are joined by Tyler Ellen. So just give me a few minutes and she will be right on. I also wanted to let everyone know this is the last episode of Tea Time for 2020. So it's been such an awesome experience to be able to create space and interview so many different thought leaders in our community and really raise a lot of awareness around so many important topics and bringing more equity to our space. You know, we have really been able to accomplish a lot through these conversations in terms of how we're looking at our policy as a company, how we are approaching external relationships, and how we continue to build our team. So it's been fantastic, and we're very excited to revisit Tea Time in 2021. In the meantime, we, just like everyone else, our biggest focus right now is getting everyone out to vote. So we're very excited to sort of reinvigorate Tea Time in 2021. All right, let's see if I can add her in.
Hi,
Hello. Hi. How's it going?
good. How are you?
Good, good. Happy Tuesday. I guess it's like the middle of the week. What do we say to each other on Tuesdays?
Happy
We're here.
day. Happy almost day. Like,
Yeah, we're here. So Tyler, it's so lovely to have you on. Thank you for joining us. You are actually our final guest of 2020 for Tea Time. So we're happy to have a final bang out with you. So it's going to be great. And for everyone that's joining, would love for you first to just share a little bit about your background and why you're joining.
yeah, absolutely. I come from a brand marketing background. I studied photography and fine art in college, but shortly after that, I went into brand marketing for an e-commerce startup within the outdoor industry. And then from there, went more specialized into social media marketing at a really fun underwear brand called Me Undies. If you listen to podcasts, you've probably heard of them. And then, I made the move to Detroit. I'm originally from Los Angeles. So I moved to Detroit a few months ago. And since that move, I have spread on to doing freelance social media strategy and photography. So that's sort of like where my background is. I'm really excited to be a part of Tea Time to sort of speak to, brand marketers and social media strategists and help them figure out how to approach your strategies and, working with influencers and content creators through a lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah, and absolutely. And thank you so much. And so, I mean, I think like starting with just your personal background is really interesting because you're mixed. And so like,
Yeah,
we had talked about that when we had our first chat in terms of like how that sort of has played into your overall, of course, view of the world. And then now working within the brand space as well, like you see through the lens of two different audiences at times.
absolutely. Yeah,
Mm.
going through the world as a biracial person, being half Black, being half white, I have been afforded privileges in this world, and I've also, faced obstacles. So I've taken, all those things that I've faced and definitely bring them into the workplace. So yeah, it's definitely a unique perspective and something that I'm thankful for sure.
Yeah. And so, I mean, like, I guess because that all kind of comes down to everyone has a unique background and a unique story to share. And that's the whole point of Tea Time. Now, applying that concept to the brand world, right? Like you're talking about content creators and what really resonates in content, and pulling that back to authenticity. Like, what do you see on your end that really makes a great, compelling piece of content as a brand marketer? What are you looking for?
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to authenticity, the biggest thing when I'm working with like either like a freelance client or if I'm in a meeting and we're trying to figure out who we're going to partner with or what the partnership's going to look like, um, one of the biggest things is making sure that the person we're working with knows that we're investing in them and we're not just, tokenizing them and using them to prop up our own mission, but we're also investing in their own values and mission. So one great way of doing that, I think you guys are already doing a great job, is, you know, finding out what they're passionate about and financially like donating to that. So let's say you're paying an influencer for a partnership, matching that payment to an organization of their choice. And so not only are you investing in them and, you're using the work that they're doing to work with your company, but you're also investing in things that they're passionate about. So you guys are doing that, right now with this Instagram live, and making.
Right. And actually, let's shout that out really quick before we dive too deep. So we
Yeah.
are doing the live fundraiser. So we donated $500 on your behalf to the Black Women's Health Imperative. So I'd never heard of this organization before. Can you explain a little bit more about why you selected it?
Yeah. So they're first national organization that's supporting Black women in health in every sense of the word. So through mental and physical health. To me, it's really important right now as, women's, rights when it comes to health and reproductive health in this country. They're really sort of like, up for debate right now. So that's an organization that I feel like really important right now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's such a timely discussion today of all days, speaking of about those issues. So yeah, that's great. And so, and that's really how we sort of live into it, right? Like we didn't have a nonprofit of choice for Tea Time. It really was up to our guests about who they wanted to support. And I guess there definitely is something that you can take from that and apply to just the overall branded content world, right? Of like really letting the creator sort of speak in a way that they want to, and in a way that they find authentic to their own sense of self. But I guess there's always a bit of a imbalance or discrepancy between what an influencer wants to create versus what a brand's expecting. And I wonder, from your perspective, having worked at several large brands, when you're thinking about brand marketing, how do you sort of like level out the two between like keeping someone authentic, but then also reaching your brand goals with the content?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is like just a super relevant example that I came across this week. There's a great digital creator. Her name is Karen Ramos. She goes by Nature Chilla on Instagram. So she's really popular in the outdoor movement and diversifying the outdoors. And so she recently partnered with Aldo Shoes, and they came to her with a campaign about voting for the outdoors. And she then went back to them, super passionate about the campaign, but she pitched them an idea of how to better bring it to life, not only for it to resonate better with her audience, but to also help it resonate better with their audiences. So it went from being a partnership that was really sort of like a pay to post campaign, and it transitioned actually it being something that, they sponsored a trip for her to go to the outdoors, to go to California and go through redwoods, and be able to create content there and show people what voting for the outdoors actually looks like. So I think for brand marketers, they do need to trust, the influencer and the creator, and trust what's going to resonate with their audience, because ultimately that's how you're measuring the success of the campaign, making sure that comes back to you and your brand. So, and then I think, to your point, it does need to be balanced out with staying true to the brand's mission as well. And so I think just like setting those clear like values and goals for the campaign, and making sure that whatever the creator is pitching is staying aligned with that.
So I guess like, looking for some tea, like what makes your skin crawl in terms of like what you see out there, either on the content side or in like just working in the brand space, like what gets on your nerves?
That's a great question. There's so many things. I think one thing is that a lot of brand marketers are sort of, when they're looking to diversify their marketing, they're just looking at numbers. They're looking at quotas or things they need to hit. Like we need, X amount of Black partners. We need X amount of Latinx partners. And they're just looking at them as numbers instead of actual people and actual like stories to tell. So I would say that's one thing, and just making sure you're actually like developing those partnerships and, just not checking the box, then moving on to the next, and making sure they're actually creating longevity with those partnerships and campaigns. I would say another thing is that, brand marketers should be a little bit more realistic with themselves in terms of what it actually looks like to be working with more, BIPOC influencers and creators. So for example, some things that I had to have some meetings or talk with people about is coming to terms with the fact that sometimes you might need to up your budget for specific people. That's the reality of it. We are at a time where a lot of brands are, waking up to a diversity problem within their company. And, they're trying to figure out how do we include more people. And now like a lot of us creators, a lot of Black people, we're in high demand right now. So I think that that's something that people need to understand, is that, you know, pricing is getting a bit more competitive, and ultimately it's going to be beneficial for everyone. So, you know, the sooner people can realize that and face that, I think the better for everyone.
When you are going about like working with influencers, and I mean, I think like we've actually talked about this a few times in past episodes, because we're always stuck in the hard place between, on one end, we're trying to get the most bang for our buck with what our budget is, but at the same time trying to keep the pay gap amongst influencers as small as possible, like really trying to offer fair market value rates on content. You know, I guess like, so you just mentioned that brands need to be aware that like budgets are increasing because there's a supply and demand issue. How do you see this kind of panning out into the years to come? Do you think that there's just going to be more market regulation across the board when it comes to influencers' fees, or do you think that things will sort of just kind of or I guess I'm curious to see what your thoughts are.
Yeah, that's a great question. I haven't thought too far what that's going to look like in the coming years. I would say that we are going to see it balance out a bit more. I think right now, because we are in the height of like a revolution and a movement, things are, you know, that gap is increasing. But I think, you know, for better or for worse, it will level out. You know, it's already losing momentum. The demand, I could see it decreasing, and I feel like that's what's going to keep, you know, the pay gap level.
Yeah, that it's kind of an interesting thing to think about, right? Because it's like now it's hard to put things into more of like I guess I shouldn't say like real world, because this is the real world, but like, you know, there's an inflated rates going on right now because of a supply and demand, and we see that across the board. Even with, we're in quarter 4 now, so with holiday we see that just across the board with all influencers. You know, it's interesting that's happening. I'm just curious about, you know, like the takeaways for brands, like now that we're kind of at the I guess, I don't know, tail end of what seemed to be a really big movement this year with Black Lives Matter, and now the news cycle has sort of moved on to start covering other topics, but these are still issues that are affecting so many people. It's not like it's going anywhere. You know, I guess, what are the learnings that we can really give brands? Like, what are the, you know, hard pills to swallow moving into 2021 that are not just like an immediate response to what was going on this year, but more so like embedded in their overall strategy?
Absolutely. So I think one thing to sort of, you know, keep up that longevity and keep up the momentum is setting real KPIs and like setting real things that are going to hold them accountable to the commitments that they made at the very beginning, you know, year. So, and you set those things by understanding, you know, where is your power, where is your privilege for your own brand? Is it that you have a giant audience, you have 1 million followers? Okay, how are you going to amplify voices through that channel? Or is it that you have like big budgets, you can actually like financially invest in people? How many people are you going to invest in? And so just finding out like, you know, where your value is and how you can sort of spread the wealth, whether it's through your reach, your finances, you know, whatever it may be. I think another thing to sort of keep up that longevity is making sure that you're not siloing conversations about diversity and inclusion. So, you know, instead of, you know, setting up a separate meeting to talk about like, okay, how are we gonna, you know, tackle diversity, you know, on our website or whatever it is, like make it part of your weekly brainstorms or whatever your standing meetings are. Make it part of those meetings all the time, instead of setting up siloed things, because I think the more people look at them as these separate issues or this like, you know, this afterthought, it's always going to look like an afterthought externally, you know, how it comes through in your marketing as well.
That's a great point. I think we could even take some feedback on that. It's like we definitely talk about it a lot as a larger group, but we also have our DEI team that meets, and I think that's where we make a lot of the majority of the headway. But you know, it is important to keep in mind for sure that that's not, yeah, like if it is an afterthought, how can we continue to improve our processes to make that something that's always top of mind? I feel like, you know, we've been good at doing that across the board this year. Like it has been something we have been super, super committed to. I think, one way that we learned, and it seems to be the way for a lot of brands right now, is kind of by like messing up, right? Like, where did we actually have some blind spots and where did we need to call ourselves out? And we did. What do you see, like, in terms of mistakes that brands make? Like, what are the learning lessons here that we could grow from?
Yeah, so I think a big thing is, oh God, so many mistakes that people make, but I think one thing is that when like big decisions are being made, what partner do you choose, or what person or what organization are we going to choose? I think making sure that you have everyone in the room. I think a lot of times,
Hmm.
like I said, siloed conversations, maybe somebody somewhere makes a decision, but there haven't been all the right stakeholders. So I think just making sure that everyone's there, making sure you're checking in on it constantly. I think another problem is that diversity is seen as like this catch-all phrase, but a lot of companies or brands tend to focus on one aspect of diversity, or, one type of marginalized group when there are many. And I think that's something that all brands will always struggle with, is like, how do we satisfy everyone? And how do we actually represent every single person? You're not gonna be able to do it all in one day or in 1 month or in one campaign. But I think the thing is making sure that you're constantly trying to put the focus on different people, just the way that you move throughout the world even, and just reflecting more of
Hmm.
that. I think that's a big mistake a lot of people are making right now, is just focusing on, like I said, just one marginalized community, when really all of us are facing very similar intersectional struggles.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think that like the way we've been thinking about it this year is, one, the catalyst of a lot of change was Black Lives Matter. And this is the problem that's really started with this year is police brutality, right? Like, we know that there is a misuse of police force, and that is very specific to being Black. And so, like, I think that's where we were like just absolutely enraged, still am, honestly.
Yeah,
But then in a greater spectrum, and this is where it was again calling ourselves out to realize, like, okay, so this is a major issue, but then also, what about everyone else? Like, there's issues across the board that affect everyone, and sometimes it affects multiple groups, and you're certainly right. In fact, we did a casting audit where we looked at all of the influencers that we have used for campaigns. And we do a good job in general. Like, we were actually pretty impressed, because we were like, wow, like the racial makeup of our influencer pool is very diverse. So that made us happy, right? But looking even further at that to realize, well, we're doing a great job actually of retaining and keeping both white and Black influencers and Asian influencers, but we actually were not doing a great job of attracting Hispanic talent. And so it was an interesting way for us to sort of see, what does that struggle look like? But I don't know. There's just still something, and I feel like we're not ever going to like get there completely, at least not anytime soon. But there is a specific plight to being Black in America that we are still working to tackle. So
yeah,
though all of these other communities and all these other racial groups are things that we are consistently thinking about as we evolve as a company, we know that a huge, huge, huge piece of this for us will be specific to the experience of being Black.
for sure.
Um, and so I guess, like, speaking of like so getting a little bit deeper into the spectrum of diversity and really like what it means once we are there, right? We've started to encounter a lot of other problems too. And I'm curious about your feedback on this. So one thing, when we get to actually casting an influencer, even if now we're at a quote unquote like diversity quota within the campaign, but now it's like, what does their aesthetic look like? What do they dress? What's their hair texture like? Like, how dark is their skin? Like, it's just like there's still so many barriers to entry. On your end, with the talent that you're working with, how do you sort of manage that? And do you feel like there's anything that brands could learn in terms of being more open-minded? Once, okay, it's like, it's great that you're casting a Black person, but now let's talk about all the different types of Black people that are out there, because it's not just one mold, right?
Yeah, this is something I've faced a lot of just in my personal life. Being a
Mm-hmm.
lighter skinned person, really, I'm privileged in the sense of colorism and featureism, having, Eurocentric features, things like that. It's something really do need to keep top of mind. There's not one type of Black person or one type of Asian person. There's, a spectrum of, beautiful different features, hair textures, everything. And so I think that's something that brands just have to really think about. And that's what I mean when I think there need to be more people in the rooms making these like casting decisions, because we've all experienced different neighborhoods, different places, different people. And I think not everybody has the same experiences and comes into those meetings, thinking in that way. So it's something to think about for sure. And I think also just on the technical side, in terms of how you're photographing different skin colors and how you're styling hairstyles, there's times when like we've brought in, we've casted like a content creator, influencer for a shoot, and making sure that you have a hairstylist that knows how to do Black hair. These are things, really need to be thought about, especially because you don't want to put someone in a position where they're walking into a shoot and they don't feel confident on that day because they have someone doing their hair that just doesn't have experience. And so you're not setting up that person for success, and then the campaign isn't going to be as successful. So I think I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yeah, I mean, and that's really where, even as a company, I guess we were in a great situation, all things considered, because we have a very diverse team to begin with. And so, like that helped us inform ourselves of the best way to move forward in a lot of ways, because that feedback was at the table, right? So like we had sort of defined diversity, equity, and inclusion this year as how did we phrase it? So it's like diversity is like having a dance that everyone's invited to. And then inclusion is making sure that everyone is actually invited to come dance on the dance floor. But then equity is making sure that everybody has the same means of transportation to get to the dance in the first place. Like that's kind of how we have started to break it down. And so, for us, like when we thought about that in terms of the team, it's kind of like, thank God that we had a diverse team to begin with, because actually, funny enough, speaking about Black hair, that's a great example. So one of our campaign partners right now is in the hair care space, and we have already implemented diversity requirements for all of our campaigns. But this is a moment where, we're working with hair, and it's like, thank God we have Nicole on our team who's Black, that knows like our current production cycle for content usually is like about 30 days. But if we're talking about hair and the hair cycle and how many times you're washing, like this is a lot longer of a campaign span, right? And so like little things like that you wouldn't think about, if like personally, I would never think about that. I'm not a Black woman, so I would never know that, right? How do you feel like you being a biracial but also Black woman, right, within the workspace, how has that let you insight to kind of think two steps ahead in situations maybe similar to that?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it comes back to like my personal experience. So because I am mixed, I have, traditional Black like hair, but, I grew up around my mother who like currently transitioned to wearing braids. So, I've seen it firsthand, but I haven't actually experienced it. So when it comes to things where I still feel like I lack the knowledge, even though I am a Black woman, I always make sure I'm speaking with someone who is an expert, somebody who does have that Black experience that's maybe different from mine. Can't pretend to like know it all. I can't speak for all Black people, and I can't speak for all biracial people. So I think it's important that, we people, whoever we are, like we recognize the limits of our experience and know like when to go over and speak to someone else about theirs. I think that's a really important thing for people to understand.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I guess, I mean, I'm curious, within the actual workspace, have there been instances where your personal background has helped you to really like see things differently, maybe versus other people on your team, leadership? Like has that been something that has given you a unique role?
Yeah, absolutely. I think especially just when it comes to photography, not only being a photographer and just looking at photos more closely, but like specifically working in, underwear industry, and you're looking at people's bodies and different body types, and you're looking at a lot of skin and a lot of different features, making sure that everything, the product looks great on every type of body, on every skin tone, making sure that everything, like you said, there's equity, there's diversity, there's inclusion, everybody is invited, everybody feels comfortable, and they all got there in the same way. So I would say that's where sort of my personal background being biracial has led to like better decision making in those types of meetings when it comes to like art direction and creative direction, definitely.
Yeah, yeah, that's super interesting. I mean, and MeUndies in general is such an inclusive company to begin with. Like their entire marketing is so great because it's definitely like opposite of what you typically see for like an underwear brand. It's like all body shapes, like just real people. So that's great. So okay, we're getting kind of close to the end on time here, Tyler. So I like to close out with one question. And so usually at the end, we like to ask, for somebody that is starting on a journey similar to yours, working in your background, you've been in the brand space, the creative space, now also photography. You've worked at large brands. You've seen the ins and outs of what it looks like on the back end from a marketing team perspective. What would you tell someone maybe that's just starting out, like just out of college? What would be your best piece of advice be?
My best piece of advice would be, it sounds cheesy because I think it's what a lot of people say, but you have to go in and create the job that you want. I think
Mm,
all my jobs, with the exception of Mandy's, have been because I reached out and told them what I'm good at and why they need me. And they either created a role for me or they realized, like, oh, maybe we should hire sooner for this role that we were thinking about next year. I think it's really being very intentional about what you want, and not being afraid to speak up to, the place that you're reaching out to and helping them, give them that extra push, like, oh, okay, maybe we do need this role, and get them to really think about it. I think also another thing, I think recently, just this year, with everything, with the momentum behind the Black Lives Matter movement, is when I really started to realize how my personal background and how my Black experience could actually really be an asset, in the professional world. And so I think my advice to people fresh out of college is like, really understand what your personal experience can do for you in the workplace and professionally, and use that to your advantage. Where traditionally sometimes it's seen as a disadvantage. Make people think differently and prove it,
yeah, yeah, that's fantastic advice. I love that. That is the closing message of Tea Time for 2020, y'all. And honestly, I don't think that's super generic advice. I have not heard that before. About going out and kind of like creating your own role. That's fantastic. I think a lot of people, especially now, and it's super timely because of the pandemic, there's a lot of actually it's funny because I'm hiring for a role right now. And it's crazy because the volume of people that are applying is insane, especially now because of COVID. A lot of people are laid off. And somebody that just easy applies for the job for me is just like the biggest turnoff. Like I want somebody to like reach out, actually have like shown me that you really want intentional, like you said, like you want to work here, you are building a case for yourself that is compelling and that makes me feel like you have enough motivation and drive that you would actually be a valuable asset to the team. So I love that. That's fantastic advice. Tyler, thank you so much for joining us today.
This was
Uh,
so fun.
yeah.
Last one, like so much pressure.
I know. Well, yeah, I know. I was actually mentioning before you jumped on, we're closing out for the year. Now, everyone, please go vote. It's like we want to remove as much noise as we possibly can and put it all towards getting people out to go vote for the next week. And, like you said, make change, be the change you want to see. So, thank you, everyone who has viewed and watched Tea Time over the past couple of months. It's been such a rewarding experience, and I'm so thankful to have been able to share the space with awesome people like Tyler. Yeah, it's just been a good one. So thanks,
Fantastic.
everyone. Thanks, Tyler. Bye. Take
I
care. Go vote.